All right, good afternoon, peace, and happy Sunday again. Welcome to the Keystone Sunday International Big Book Meeting. My name is Kimball. I am a recovered alcoholic. Uh, we're going to talk about some step four today. We're going to go through a step four, and probably won't be able to do it all today, but we're going to get deep into it. You know, a lot of people are scared when it comes to step four. They're scared to write things down. They're scared of what they will discover within themselves. That was me. Shoot, I don't want to do no step four inventory for a lot of years because I rebelled at the thought of what I would find within myself. But anyway, we're going to get these instructions straight out the big book and we'll go from there. So then, first of all, last week, we talked about making a decision, which is in step three. Make this decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. But see, just making a decision, we discussed that wasn't good enough. It takes action. So step four is the first action step that we get to. So in step three, the step three prayer that we all just recited, one part of it, we offer ourselves to God. God, I offer myself to thee. Ask God to change and build. Use another part to build with me and to do thy will. Ask God to give us direction and guidance. We ask God to free us from the bondage of self and to help us to be of service to other people. Ask God to take away our problems so we can help others. And we state that power, love, and God's way of life can be truly ours. And also ask that we always do God's will. Before an alcoholic of my type, this was a vital, important, life-changing step for me. So, Brother Dan, at the bottom of page 63, where it goes, next we launched on a vigorous course of action. We can go down to the end of the second paragraph on the next page, where it says, not fool himself about values. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Right at the bottom of page 63, everybody. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and critical step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things ourselves which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to the causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One objective is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. No doubt. Thank you, Brother Dan. Purpose of step 4 is to be rid of the things which have been blocking us. We put forth a strenuous effort to face them and to be rid of them. And this is how we do it. We have some worksheets that we fill out. So step 4. This part of the 12 steps is infamously the scary one. People like to fear the 4th step. They simply don't want to do it. I did a 4th step one time drinking. That's the only way I could do it, right? Because I didn't want to face this stuff. So I got drunk one time and I just started writing page after page after page. Years later, when I sobered up, that fear had left me, right? So when my sponsor 12 stepped me through this thing over 3.5 years ago, I didn't have no fear to face the step 4. I used to have a fear running out of my alcohol, though. That was my biggest fear in the whole world. So, but why fear the things that's been causing me from having a relationship with power? So this is a very crucial step. It means we got inventory sheets. We write these things down. And step 4 requires a searching and fearless moral inventory. Notice it mentions of ourselves, not inventory the other person. See, I used to do other people's inventory too. Well, you's a butthole. I'm gonna drink. You piss me off. I'm gonna drink. I don't like what you said to me. I'm gonna drink. See, I was doing their inventory. If they had defects, I was quick to point them out that I couldn't point out. I couldn't even see my own defects at all. So the benefits of doing this step 4 inventory, it strengthens our sobriety, right? And we can start our spiritual growth right here and movements toward mending our relationships to our higher power. See, step 4 blocked me off from God, right? In my personal experience, I thought I was God. The big book explains that. First of all, we had to quit playing God, right? As long as I was playing God, my life was miserable. I stayed restless, irritable, discontented. I stayed in conflict with God. I stayed in conflict with myself. I stayed in conflict with people, places, and institutions and things, and everything in the world was wrong except me, in other words. So the biggest requirement for step 4, honesty. That's the key word. You know, we got honesty, wilderness, open-mindedness. Yeah, honesty, wilderness, and open-mindedness. But honesty, you know, and how it works, it talks about being honest 3 times in the very first paragraph on page 58. Rigorous honesty. So we got to get down, because we alcoholics, we've been some dishonest people. I know I have. I mean, I would tell a lie about everything. I would tell a lie about this, and then forget what I've been lied about, and then have to tell another one to cover that one up, and then try to cover another one up. Very dishonest. I was going to tell you a lie to get what I wanted out of you, and then I tell you a lie when I come back and approach you again. I couldn't even keep up with the lies, so to say. I was defected. I was afflicted by lying, dishonesty. Shoot, I couldn't be honest. If you was looking at me, I couldn't even be honest, you know, and that's some crazy stuff. And so, one thing about step 4, you know, in the rooms you hear things about our secrets keep us sick, right? I heard that a lot of years in the room. But it actually is a threat to our recovery. And in my personal experience, I had secrets that I didn't want to tell nobody, and then trying to hold on to them, it nearly killed me a whole lot of time. And that was one thing that was keeping me sick. Then when I got to step 5, my sponsor, I had to let these things out, things I never revealed to nobody else. And it freed me. Then I can have an open relationship with God instead of me trying to be God and me thinking I can run the whole world. So another thing about coming into this step, we alcoholics, you know, it talks about at some point we couldn't distinguish the true from the false, right? That's a big problem. I couldn't separate truth from the false over there. The delusion, talked about living in a delusion. But the reality of it is the drunken laws and the war stories that we had accumulated over the years of drinking and using and whatever, they are embroidered into the very fact of our existence. It is who we think we are. God didn't create us to be no alcoholics, but we became alcoholics, crushed by self-will impulses, right? So we drank alcohol until we became ill from it. So, but then when we get down to the page, the inventory page, we can now get a new perspective, a new outlook, a bigger picture on our patterns, our selfishness, our responsibility in situations. And in the process, we are building with an accurate self-appraisal with true self-worth as the reward. This is where honesty comes in. I had to get deep down honest with myself. See, because in my years of alcoholism, all of us, alcoholism created this delusion of thinking, and it limited our ability to understand the damage and the havoc that we cause in all our relationships. So before we could safely move forward, we needed a framework through which we could sort out our past honestly. So the step 4 inventory provides that framework. You know, when we're building a house or building a structure, we gotta have some kind of a frame, right? I mean, we start off with this foundation, but then we got to have a frame to go to the side, right? So we can put walls and stuff. So this is a similar way. It reminds me of arch of freedom, right? We building a structure. So this step 4 gives us a framework, and we can build from that structure. So as we're going through the inventory, what we'll be doing, it'll help us identify, like I said, some of the things that was blocking us off from God, the negative thoughts, the negative emotions that we may have, and the actions that we cause, being consequences, right? Consequences didn't make us alcoholics, but being an alcoholic caused us to have a lot of consequences. So we can look at these things. So in our past, we probably justified bad behavior. And once again, like I said, we blame other people, places, and things for problems that we ourselves had created. Now, in step 4, we can begin to take responsibility for all our past actions and our actions that we deal with today. This may mean looking at and acknowledging painful moments, embarrassing moments, a difficult time, thoughts, emotions, and actions. But that's cool. It's all good because your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs are actually the roots of our behavior. It's something deep down within us. So as we begin to do step 4, we get a chance to examine all of our tendencies toward where it talks about fear. We're going to be looking at fear. We have a fear inventory in our 4th step. Of course, we'll talk about resentments. That's one. Anger. Of course, pride. Pride is a great big block. I was too prideful to actually accept the plan that was outlined in this book. I thought I could do it myself. See, that was pride. Self-will and self-pity. So we can look at them areas too in our 4th step inventory. The guilt and the shame, we can look in that. We'll be looking at relationships. We even have a sex inventory we can look at. So we'll do that piece by piece. The main thing we'll probably get through with today will probably be resentment. So, Brother Dan, this will probably have to go this week and then probably next week. Maybe even be a 3-week course because step 4 is very important.
Yep.
Especially when we're taking somebody through it, right? We have to thoroughly explain these things because if not, they may miss out on something very important. See, now it took me a minute to do. It didn't take me long to do my step 4. It really did. But on page 64, so it says we had to get down to causes and conditions. The source within. We did have a talk about that a few weeks ago about our liquor was but a symptom. So the symptoms that we have is something that's rooted is deep down within us, right? But now we can face these things. We want to get rid of these things because holding on to these things, shoot, we can drink again. There's a couple of examples in the big book, right? Man, my man Fred, I think, was one of them. Fred got to step 3. He failed to enhance his spiritual life, so this fool ended up getting drunk again and kept on drinking, right? So, because he didn't take the action at the end of step 3, it says next we launched on a vigorous course of action. It said next. That's the key word. So, then back to page 64, it says, therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. So, what they're going to do during the step 4 inventory, they're going to teach us a recipe. In other words, they're going to show us the process of how they did it, what they did to get through the step 4 process. It's just a bunch of writing. We got to write it down. We're not going to remember every darn thing we did to people and places and things, but the ones that constantly run into our mind. These are the important things that we need to put down on our sheet. It says a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. A fact-finding and fact-facing process. Wow. We got to find out the facts about ourselves. We got to face these things. Okay, I was this and I was that. We'll get to that in just a minute. So, one object is to discause damage or unsellable goods to get rid of them promptly and without regret. Call a moral inventory. As we say, honesty, it demands rigorous honesty and truth. It demands the truth. We have to be as truthful as possible. So we can't fool ourselves about values, because the moral part is what we expect. We were morally deficient in our drinking days, but now that we done started the process of going through the 12 step, we can look at our morals. We can reevaluate them. In other words, because apparently the morals I was practicing, they wasn't worth a crap. Because shoot, I stayed being a wreck. So I needed to change. I needed to change in thinking. But I couldn't remember all this stuff in my head. So, we had to write it down. But then, Brother Dan, on page 64, we did exactly the same thing with our lives.
We
And
did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out for the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure, being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations. Shall I go on?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Cool. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically.
Okay, you stop right there, brother, for now.
Cool.
And hold your spot right there. It says we did exactly the same thing with our lives. Just like that business had to take inventory, we had to take inventory on ourselves, not looking at other people, places, things. We got to look at ourselves. This can be scary, no doubt. But if we want to recover from this alcoholism, we must do it. Put it all down. So it says, first, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Well, we were driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, right? And then we find out right now, self is what has been defeating us all the time. Our thinking, our actions, our behaviors, that's what was killing us. Self. So then it says, being convinced that self manifested in various ways, it had defeated us the whole time. So we're going to consider its common manifestations. We get bitter at people, right? And bitter indignation is hard, because we can resent a person for basically anything. If a person even takes a dollar bill from us or something, we can hold resentment against that person because they done did something to us that we felt that was not right. So we get a certain attitude toward this person. We get angry at this person. Anger it can lead us to a resentment pretty quick. Because if I hold on to this anger, I'm subject to develop a resentment. But then what we're looking at the blockages. And this is in all of us alcoholics. We're not talking about no triggers. See, triggers, that stuff come from treatment centers. But we decided we're going to look at the behaviors. Yeah, behaviors, our behaviors. Not worry about that other person over there. So, and then it says, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. And it says, from the resentment stems all forms of spiritual disease, right? From the resentment, no doubt about it. If we rolling around in anger and self-pity and selfishness and self-centeredness, that's a form of a spiritual disease as well. See, that holding on, harboring in resentments is dangerous for an alcoholic. Because I remember when I used to get resentful at a person, shoot, I'm going to get drunk, then I'm going to come back looking for you to want to do something to you. That's a hard resentment. Even when we get in recovery, we hold on to a resentment, it can throw us back to a place we don't want to be. That's why the book continues to talk about this personal inventory. So step 4 and step 10 talks about inventory. We have to continuously inventory ourselves. It's part of the daily reprieve. As a matter of fact, steps 10, 11, and 12 are our growth books. No doubt. So, and this part of the human condition. Resentments come from our humanness, not our alcoholism. It don't come from behaviors. It's part because we are human. All humans will have resentments at one time or another. Then a key point here, when it says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Oh, yes. This spiritual malady is what blocks us from self. If we are too rooted in selfishness and self-centeredness, we don't have no room for a power that's greater than us. I'm the power that's greater than me then, and that's really dangerous. You don't want to turn the fool loose with me without no power today. No, sir. I lived that life far too long. Thank God for this program. So these darn resentment. So, we take this stock honestly. I have to reiterate honesty over and over because, remember at the beginning, we were willing to go to any length to get the victory over our alcoholism. And it's going to take honesty for the rest of our life. Yes, because our attitudes, our thinking will be changing, our behavior will change. So, Brother Dan, at the bottom of page 63, you can go over to the chart. 64, my bad. Where you left off at on 64.
Yeah, cool. No problem.
Read from there over to the chart. We're gonna take a look at this chart right here.
In dealing.
Yeah.
Or did I get that far?
Let's see.
Yeah, in dealing with resentments.
Yeah, here we go.
We set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. On our grudge list, we set up opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations, which had been interfered with? We were usually, oh, sorry, yeah, that's it, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, you good right there. Yeah, you
Carried
good
away
right
as usual.
No doubt. Thank you much. Thank you much. Yes, it says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We got this example here on page 65. So I got some copies of my Keystone inventory worksheets that we do. I think, let me see, I should have put it on my screen, but anyway, that's what the inventory sheet looks like. It's a great example here on page 65. And it's loaded in columns. It's got 4 columns. That's column 1. And then we go to column 2, 3, and 4. There's several columns here. So then it asks us a question, or what it says. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. So in column 1 here, it says, I'm resentful. See, in this column right here, it says, I'm resentful at people, places, institutions. So we set them down on paper. Like, if I'm pissed off at my wife or something, if I got a resentment on her, I'm going to put her name right here. And then column 2, it says, the cause, why we were angry. So we simply write down right in this column, why are we angry at them? Why we got a resentment against them? But then column 3 comes to talk about which part of myself is affected. So then I can turn the sheet this way, and it's got a list of things. One of them is social instinct, right? It talks about, was my self-esteem or personal relationship affected? We got a security instinct. And it talks about, was my material instincts affected, or was my emotional instincts affected? The next one talks about the sex instinct. It's part of it too, because we have resentments and our sex inventory too. Ain't no doubt about it. So It says, was I affected by, it talks about acceptable sex relations here. And then it talks about hidden sex relations. So I had to put all this stuff down. Next column talks about my ambitions. Was my social ambitions affected? Was my sexual ambitions affected? Was my security affected? And then it talks about general categories. Was I selfish? Was I dishonest? Was I self-seeking? Was I frightened? Was I inconsiderate? See, all of these things we can now review. And then once you get over to page 67, it's going to ask us in the last column, column number 4, are we willing to set these matters straight? Notice it asks us, are we willing to set these matters straight? Remember, step 4, we get a chance to write down the things that's been blocking us off from the power that's greater than us. So if we are not willing to set the matter straight, we're still going to be a block. We'll be a block to ourselves. So we need willingness. That's the key. It's indispensable. So it's as simple as this example here on page 65, when it talks about Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, he says, I'm resentful at. The top of the page says, I'm resentful at. And then it talks about the cause, and then and how did it affect him. So Mr. Brown, he said what the example that said is talking about Mr. Brown. It says, I'm resentful at Mr. Brown, and the cause I'm resentful of Mr. Brown was his attention to my wife. He told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get my job at the office. So on this column in our worksheets, it's got all these things I talked about. It's all lined up down here, column by column. It affects. How did it affect us? Well, his attention to my wife, it affects my sex relations, my self-esteem, fear. Fear is going to always pop up. Told my wife about my mistress. So it affects my sex relations, my self-esteem, my fear. And then it said, Brown may get my job at the office. Well, this affects my security. If he get my job at the office, I'm going to have a job. It's going to screw up my self-esteem. That's another fear factor. Notice this word fear is bracketed all throughout our inventory. Fear is it's a terrible thing. Sometimes there is some healthy fear though. So in this case here, we have to let these fears out. We got to write them down, and then we'll be prepared to talk about them. No doubt. Resentment is our #1 offender. So, like I said, we write down the list. So, resentments. And talking about resentments, though, we learned that resentment is a condition or state of mind where one by one relieves some past event, relives a past event, right? Yeah, and feels the emotion from that event as if it were happening right now. See, we can go back in the past. We may have been holding resentments against people for many years. Now we can relive it. We can relive these resentments that they'll never let go. When I did my step 4 and step 5, I had a terrible resentment. Had been cocked for about 25 years. I had to learn that it had to be put down on paper. It had to be talked about with my sponsor on step 5. When I was able to release and let that go, it gave me freedom. Boom, well, that resentment is gone. I had cleared up a whole lot of other resentments, but it was one that was bothering me super bad. And I tried to drink that resentment away, but y'all know how that worked. The resentment was still there. I don't give a darn how much I tried to kill myself drinking this alcohol. So resentment can feel like, well, it's back. And it's the fuel that it'll set a fire in us, right? It'll set a fire in us. So once again, when we start on this inventory, we list these places. Memories of people. We think about the people that resented us. Put it down. Write it all down. Such and such did this to me last year. They broke in my car, stole something out of it, and I'm pissed off. If I ever see him, I'm going to kill him again. I'm going to kill him. That's a resentment. pissed off at this person. And it's coming from deep inside, right? Yeah, it's coming from inside of me. Then we have to ask ourselves, why am I holding on to this resentment? It is over, it is over. See, we alcoholics, right? And then people in our life, we can go back in the past on people, but we can dig us some stuff on the joker from years ago. Yeah, I resent you from this from 1981. You know, that's the kind of thing I was thinking. That's what we do. So then we look at these people, we look at these institutions, we look at these organizations, that's included too. We look at principles, we look at ideals, we can look at beliefs and events, we can look at situations or circumstances that have set us off to have these bad negative feelings. And some of these negative feelings may include sadness, regret, anger, resentment, fear again, and bitterness. Now, when you're writing this stuff down, some of these things on our list, it may appear to pop up multiple times. That is okay. So we don't try to judge or analyze at this point, but from now on, we just try to be as thorough as possible. Now I have an important note. Let me read my note. So I take a lot of notes too. I've been taking them. So it's important to note that some people will try to avoid writing more inventory. We can feel embarrassed or fearful about our writing ability, or even about someone else reading what we may have. So I implore you to do not let these fears stop you until you put it in a tangible, readable form. You still haven't done your fourth step yet. So anybody working on these sheets, just continue to work on until you get ready to do your step 5. Then we simply let it out. We always say a prayer once we get these things done. Well, I include prayer in all areas of my life, and that's the part of going through this process because it develops this way of living. We start depending on a power greater than ourselves instead of our own thoughts, our own emotions, our own feelings. So we may face things that we think that they are so bad that we just can't include them in our inventory, right? Don't be afraid. You're not alone. I mentioned earlier, it was some stuff in my inventory that I just felt was just awesome and gross, and I didn't know when to put them down. So that's part of going through the cleaning out process. But you know, I had to bow down one day. I said, I got to write this down, and I got to tell my sponsor about it when I do my step 5, or whoever I do my step 5 with. It don't necessarily have to be your sponsor. It can be a spiritual advisor, as long as it's a trusting person. So I shared with him some things that went on with me in childhood, right? Nobody ever knowed about it. Nobody ever had no kind of idea. But you know what? It relieved me of all the pain I had been going through for years while I was trying to drink it away. I had to write it down. So I had to get out of the fact that, well, this was a bad experience then. I don't have that experience now. That was done. That was in the past. I need to write this down. I need to be discussed with somebody. And so I did. And it relieved me of all the hate that I might have had against these people. It simply relieved me of that bondage. It really did. So, but that's what we go through. It's based on fear. We have fears. We might not want people to find out some things, but at some point, if we want to fully recover from alcoholism or whatever we suffer from, we got to talk to them. We got to write them down. We got to get them out. It's part of our inventory. We don't want to keep holding on to stuff deep inside of us that we think we can just cover up and bear. Because if it ain't been buried in all this time, it's still gonna be there. We need to let it go. So, but believe this, everything in all of our inventories, we done heard it all before, we done seen it all before. So there's nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be ashamed of. That's from past experience. So never be afraid. If something needs to be brought out, simply bring it out. So then there's a few questions that we must ask ourselves when we're doing this inventory. Well, first of all, Brother Dan, hold on. Next, bottom of page 65, that column right there. We went back through our lives And I want you to stop on the where it says on 66, our moments of triumph were short-lived. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Right
Uh-huh.
at the bottom of page 65, everybody. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived.
Okay, right there be great, brother Dan. Thank you so much. So we went back through our lives. Once again, we go back through these things. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. There's that word, honesty again, and thorough. We must be thorough from the very start. It sounds like in how it works, I think it is. So when we were finished, we considered it carefully. It means we look back over all our names and we look back over all our check mark, and we're going to see which part we was affected by. So the first thing, the book says first thing on parent, well, the parent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. Boy, they told the truth again right here. I always thought the world was wrong and people were wrong. I was always right. Shoot, he had no defects. Ain't nothing wrong with me. It's something wrong with you because you don't drink or you don't drink enough. But I blame the world. So to conclude that others were wrong, it says that was as far as most of us ever got. Remember, purpose of step 4 again is to block us from these type of things. We got to move past this. So then it says the usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. Notice it says we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. Yes, it continues to get worse. Continues to get worse. So once again, talk about, there's a couple of questions I'd like to share. We always, again, we ask what people, places, or things do we resent? And then we ask ourselves what led to these resentments. We all have different examples. I won't go through now. We all have our own stuff that we know why we resentful at people and what happened. So, but then it's something we got to ask. How did our behavior contribute to your resentment? Sometimes my behavior caused people to retaliate on me, and then I still get mad at them when it was my fault from the beginning. What is that? Twisted thinking, I think they called it, right? So something else we can ask. We can ask, how have my resentments affected your life? Or how has it affected our life? And in relationship with others and with yourself. Yeah, when I had resentment, when they were piled up on me, it affected every area of my life. It affected my relationship with God because I couldn't have no relationship with God as long as I'm sitting here resentful at somebody or something or some place, person, or thing. It blocks us off. So this is why we write these things down. We want to release these blocks. And then relationship with myself, it definitely affected the relationship with myself. If I'm resentful, I'm not going to think right. I'm not going to act right. And it changes my whole behavior and outlook. Part of spiritual malady, actually, right? But spiritual malady don't make us alcoholic. It's just some of these things deep down inside that affects us personally. And for the alcoholic, it is dangerous. But then we look at who or what made us, or why did we feel ashamed or guilty about a matter which caused us to have these resentments. I hear some people sometimes in the meetings, right? They say they feeling shame, they feeling guilt, and all of this. Well, the step 4 inventory, in my instance, it took away all the shame and guilt. See, the shame and guilt was bothering me, so I would drink myself to death trying to get rid of shame and trying to get rid of guilt. But until I took this step 4 inventory and did my step 5, It cleared it up. Okay, thank you, sweetheart. All right. Okay. So then we may ask the question, how have our fears and resentments affected our relationships, our family, our work, and our romantic relationships? See, these resentments, they affect all of these areas in our lives. So that's why we get these things wrote down. Just like the resentful that like Miss Jones. She's a nut, right? This is on page 65. We look at Miss Jones on the list, that column we got. So she's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend. She's a gospel. This is a personal friendship, right? But he got a resentment against her. So what it did, it affected his personal relationship. It affected his personal self-esteem, and it's rooted in fear. It comes from the fear. So then it deals with us in romantic relationships, everything. Every area of our lives are affected. And then later on, as it talks about the sex part, right? It says, have you compulsively sought after sex? Have you used sex to fill the spiritual void of loneliness? Have any of your sexual practices hurt others or yourself? Yeah, when I did my sex inventory, when we got to it, all of these, yes. I had to go down that list. But we're gonna get to a sex inventory probably be next week. We're gonna go through the 4 inventory sheets that we're gonna be looking at. But yeah, sometimes in my past I've used sex to try to fill a void that couldn't be filled. It was a spiritual void. That's exactly what the problem was. Alcohol couldn't fill that spiritual void. Relations with people couldn't fill it. I was voidless, in other words. So then we can ask us a question, right? Ask ourselves a question. Well, what do a healthy personal relationship look like? Tell you the truth, during my drinking career, I couldn't see it. But it seemed like all my relations in between was unhealthy, and it was rooted because I had fears deep down in myself, and then I get a resentment, and I would forever hold on to it. Man, one more thing. I already talked about this though. Are there any secrets that you haven't told anyone or written about in your step work? I just mentioned an incident. I didn't exactly tell you the incident, but something that happened many years ago that I had a resentment on for years. So when I finally got to this step 4, I had to write it down and I shared it with another person. Then I was able to share with other people, but I had to get that out first. So back to the book here. Brother Dan, I'll get this short paragraph. On page 66, where it says, it is plain that a life, which includes deep resentment, only leads to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. Once again, Hard talks about harboring such feelings. They shut us off from the sunlight of the spirit. They simply shut us off from a relationship with God. So I got to put these things down. Then I have to look at where I was to blame at. Why I'm resentful at this person, place, thing, or institution or organization. What was the cause of it? What is it affecting? How is it affecting me? Of course, I said, where was I to blame? I always look at where was I to blame. Where was I at fault? Because I was always at fault in something. You can better believe that. So, Brother Dan, you can pick up here if we were to live. And yeah, to the bottom of the page. Huh?
No problem. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be dubious luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholics, these things are poison. We turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from a new, entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered. But how? We could not wish them away more than alcohol, any more than alcohol.
Okay, last sentence. You good?
Cool. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick.
All right. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.
If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. But even an alcoholic in recovery, getting angry is a very dangerous thing. But you know, when we go through this process and we develop that spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience, it changes our life. We no longer have to be angry and resentful and mean at people today. But if we were to live, we had to be free of this thing. That's the importance of steps 10 through 12. If something pops up during the day that makes us angry, we take care of it right then. You know, it started back in step 4. So we still fears. We're gonna face this stuff every day. We're gonna face somebody we're gonna disagree with, and to a point of getting angry. But like I say, step 10, when these things crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. So it says the grouch and the brainstorm were not for us, talking about us. They talking about the first 100 men and women. They all agreed on this. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. Wow. These things are poison. So we turn back to the list for here, the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from a different angle and a different angle. Peace, this is where the shift in thinking comes in. That we can look at things from a whole different angle today, not the way we used to when we were dominated by these fears. And so then it says, we began to see that the world and its people really dominated us, and they hate the wrong others. So the real had the power to actually kill the wrongdoing of others, whether it was real or whether it was false. It had the power to actually take us out, no doubt. But then it says, ask the question, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We'll talk about that next week when we come back, and then we'll move on with the sheep. We cannot wish them away any more than alcohol. Now, here's what action is required here. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. See, we can look at it from that perspective. Well, that's a sick person too. How can I help that person? Well, anyway, Brother Dan, we'll stop right here at the bottom of page 66. And next week, we'll continue with the step 4 sheets, and this roll right along. Thank everybody for being here today. Thank you, Brother Dan, for always being there to assist as my co-facilitator. God bless. And
roll Tide forever.
Roll Tide, go Dogs.
Thanks a lot for today. As always, Campbell, it was a great kickoff to a big step, like you say. So thank you very much. I've put in the chat window box, if anyone's able to see that, is the YouTube channel where the audios of Campbell's talks have been. And this one shall. Also, the contribute to the 7th tradition, please. It's also PayPal. Next week, we'll have an updated list with all the Keystone group meetings that are available online. So just to wrap up for the formal sides before I turn the recording off, let's just join me in the step 3 prayer found on page 63. Thank you. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Okay.